Welcome back to Politics Nation. Today, one of the worst state laws in America made its way to Washington. This was the scene outside the Supreme Court today where justices heard arguments on the constitutionality of Arizona's outrageous immigration law, SB 1070. Since Governor Jan Brewer has signed it 2 years ago, the law has inspired a wave of similar laws across the country, all representing a threat to our most basic civil rights. The Arizona law actually makes it a crime to be in the country illegally and makes it a state crime not to carry immigration papers. It even requires law enforcement officers to demand immigration papers from anyone stopped, detained, or arrested in the state, a provision that provides an incentive for racial profiling. I led protests in Arizona soon after the bill was introduced, and I haven't stopped fighting against it since. This immigration bill is so extreme, it's astounding that the Republican Party's presumptive nominee for president would embrace it wholeheartedly. And the difference between his position and the president's couldn't be more clear.
I think you see a model here in Arizona. The right course for America is to drop these lawsuits against Arizona and other states that are trying to do the job Barack Obama isn't doing, and I will drop those lawsuits on day one.
We now have a Republican nominee who said that the Arizona laws are a model for the country, that, and these are laws that potentially would allow someone to be stopped and picked up and asked where their citizenship papers are based on an assumption. So what we need is a change either of Congress, or we need Republicans to change their mind.
Joining me now is Representative Paul Grijalva, Democrat from Arizona. He's been an outspoken opponent to his state's immigration bill, and Maria Teresa Kumar, Executive Director of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. Both spent much of the day at the Supreme Court. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thank you.
Congressman, let me start with you. A lot of reports say conservatives on the court seem inclined to uphold this law. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I went into that hearing today apprehensive and concerned, and I left the hearing equally apprehensive and concerned. Predictable, the conservatives on the court basically defended the law, and their questions at the government were to probe a defense for that law. I think so much is at stake in this, Reverend. It's a precedent for the nation. It is a precedent that if this law is upheld, the predictions about what it will do across the nation, I think, have been underestimated. The latitude states will have, not only to enact immigration laws, but quite frankly, to get away from the supremacy clause of the Constitution and be able to do things on their own to the detriment of classes of people in their states, I think is a very, very dangerous precedent for the society, and legally doesn't uphold our Constitution.
Now, Maria, let's delve into that a second, because I think that's something people need to understand. Why, if I'm watching tonight and I'm not Latino, how could this be a threat to me? Doesn't this really set the basis up that based on what you look like, you can be targeted by law enforcement?
This is incredibly alarming. Arizona is not only looking at creating two sets of American precisely with what you're saying, what the congressman is saying based on the color of your skin, but let's take real case examples. Alabama followed in the footsteps of Arizona, and they are now pulling American students out of the classrooms and asking them if they're American or not. That's not our country. We've already lived that history, and for the Republican Party not to take heed to that and say that this is not where we're going in the future is not only frightening, but it also basically brings our country back and not looking us forward of where we could actually have unity.
And I think that's what's disturbing, Congressman, because if you're in Arizona, where this law was signed by Governor Brewer, if you don't look like a Latino or Mexican, which is the target there, then you automatically assume to be a citizen, which is grossly unfair and prejudicial. And I think that is where many of us are saying this is racial profiling and is unconstitutional.
Absolutely, and I think as other cases reach the Supreme Court that target the issue of selective enforcement, target the issue of racial profiling, I think the court is not going to be done with 1070. Those sections, if the court doesn't strike down the law as we're speaking, those sections will come because they go at the heart of basic rights in this country. It goes at the heart of our judicial history in this country, and it goes at the heart of our civil rights legislation. So this fight is far from over legally, but the Republican Party, its leadership, have completely misread this. They're assuming that this is an isolated group of undocumented people. The effect across the spectrum in the Latino community is one of taking this personally, because the affront is to those fifth, sixth generation Americans that have served this country in the military, and suddenly they find themselves by a state law.
Let's go into the politics of this a minute, Maria. The fact is, according to polling, 73% of Latino voters say the GOP is hostile or doesn't care about them, and it's reflected when you do the polling on Latino support for President Obama, 70%, Mitt Romney, 14%. I mean, are they so blinded by this policy and the support of this policy that they're willing to lose the election with this kind of lopsided support in the Latino community?
No, and I think they're actually very concerned. There's a reason why Karl Rove and Jeb Bush have gotten together and started taking the Republican Party to task, saying that they're too extreme. There's no way that a Republican or a Democratic presidential nominee can win without at least 40% of the vote. That's why Romney now is tacking towards the middle and trying to cozy up to Rubio. Unfortunately, what he's done, his words, his actions, have basically alienated the majority of the Latino community, because the Latino community, at the end of the day, they're going to vote for someone who respects them. You can't talk to them about issues if there's not a fundamental respect between you and that voter. And the voter right now, the Latino voter specifically, not only feels marginalized, but at the same time feels like there's a political awakening saying, you know, this is my country and I'm going to participate.
Now, the irony of this, Congressman, when you look at the data, there are actually less immigrants from Mexico living in the country now than there was in 2007. There was 7 million in 2007. There in 2011, only 6.1 million. So again, what are we dealing with here? What is the motivation of this?
The motivation, and it was just stated very well. The motivation by the Republican Party, the motivation for this legislation is driven by interests that have nothing to do with immigration reform. ALEC, Kobash, those people have been promoting this idea of separation for a long, long time. And they have a willing audience in Arizona and in other states. The issue before the Supreme Court is much deeper than the ruling on 1070. It goes at the heart of what this nation is. And I really think the Republican Party, no matter how they try to dance around this hostility toward the Latino community, can't get away from it. Their words are there. Their actions are there. Romney's words are there. I'll veto the DREAM Act words are there. And so there is going to be a hard effort to try to win back Latino votes. And my prediction is, based on history and based on what's going on in this nation right now, they're not going to be successful.
Senator Raúl Grijalva and Maria Teresa, Congressman Grijalva and Maria Teresa Kumar, thank you both for your time. Still ahead.
Thank you, Reverend.